guys, welcome back to Forward Farming. This week, I'm going to try to keep the intro as short as possible because we are joined by, I know I've said this before, but probably my favorite guest. It's going to be so hard to top this week's interview. I mean, if you are familiar with the MeatEater franchise, you've probably seen him around. He's been on both the show and the podcast. He is very good friends with Steven Rinella. He's also been on the Joe Rogan podcast, like the Joe Rogan, and he's joining Forward Farming today. His name is Doug Duren. He is from Cazenovia, Wisconsin, and he is really big into conservationship. So as a little Earth Day episode, we brought him on and talked about a lot of different things. Doug is just one of those guys where it's so easy to get lost in a conversation with him. He's just so wise and has a ton of great information, a lot of great stories to share. So this episode is very special. I hope you guys enjoyed Doug as much as we did. And this is going to be the first time in a long time that I am not going to babble. I'm just going to let you guys enjoy. So without further ado, here's Doug Duren. You're on a good roll.
All right. Now I'm all nervous.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, it's been an interesting set of circumstances that has brought me to this point. You know, I had a kid ask me the other day, can you tell me about your path in conservation and then how you kind of got into this whole thing? And I was just like, it's a lot of walking through the weeds, kid. I mean, and it is his, you know, you guys seem like you're old enough to know that life has a way of sort of throwing stuff at you. And I've always been one who sort of moved and reacted to the situation that I was in. I never had a really good plan in my life. I was a high school teacher for a while, and that was cool. But because of the things that I was also interested in, that's how I ended up sort of in the conservation space. So like, oh, here's the career path. That's a pretty tough one, you know? So.
Sounds about right for us. Our little hashtag is bless this mess for this podcast. So we roll with the punches and we go with it.
Yeah, cool. Well, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I know you just already kind of introduced yourself to us, but I didn't hit record. So again, hashtag bless this mess. So now that we're kind of officially starting, Doug, thank you for coming on the podcast and joining us today. If our listeners are not familiar with you, do you maybe want to start by introducing yourself, where you're from, and kind of what you're up to now?
Well, my name is Doug Duren. I am from Cazenovia, Wisconsin, and it sounds way more exotic than what it is. I am fifth generation from this area. I grew up in Cazenovia, and we had a farm 2 miles south of town. So we lived in town and had a farm south of town. There was a family who lived on the farm and milked cows, and then we gave them every other weekend off, and we did all the field work and whatnot. So I grew up with a farm, not on a farm. And I like to say that the difference is when I got on the bus in the morning, I didn't smell like cow shit like a lot of the farm kids did. So that's Southwest Wisconsin, the Driftless area, northeastern Richland County, just a lovely area to be from. I guess that you guys reached out to me because of the work that I've done in conservation and, you know, having a little bit of a platform and knowing a little bit from my work with Steven Rinella and the folks at MeatEater.
Yeah, I have to say my husband, Dan, he's the one that kind of introduced me to you through his love of Steven Rinella and the MeatEater franchise, I guess is what it is now. So we'd watch MeatEater and we'd have to watch this one episode where you were hunting with him. And he's like, that guy, that's Doug. He lives in Wisconsin. You need to get to know this guy. So why am I talking to you? Why am I not talking to your husband? I know. I'm waiting for him to just come barging through the door and just take over this interview for me. But
I was almost thinking it would have been a great episode for the guys to take over because they would have just lost their minds.
Yeah. Well, we needed to get something done today, and I feel like they would just.
That is true.
This is business. They can have their leisurely conversation a different time.
Well, depending on how this goes, I'm not promising anything now, but depending on how this goes, maybe we can do another one.
Yeah, that would be great. We can talk fun then. But thank you again. I know you're busy. You sent me an email and you're just saying, yeah, I was with Steven all weekend and doing the MeatEater podcast, and you were just talking about being on Joe Rogan. So, we're nowhere near that caliber. So,
as I said, I was also talking to some high school kids over in Pewaukee a couple hours ago, and the kid was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you answered my email." And I was like, "Well, let me tell you a story about that." I don't know, 13 years ago, my wife and I were driving up to Custer, Wisconsin, when we were going to the Alternative Energy Fair. And we were driving our Prius up there to the Alternative Energy Fair, if that tells you anything about us, I guess. And on the way up, of course, we were listening to public radio. And it was Friday afternoon, and we were listening to Jean Faraka on her show Here on Earth. Jean's since retired. But and on Friday, she had this segment called Food Fridays. And you know how people on public radio talk, right? They have that low, groovy sort of public radio voice. And she says, and today on Food Friday, we're going to be talking to a young man from Michigan who now lives in New York. And he wrote a book, A Scavenger's Guide to Haute Cuisine. And so Steven Ranella, everyone. And Steve goes, "Hey, Gene, how you doing?" And because he's from Michigan, and he's just a very unassuming guy. And so we're driving along, and I'm like, "Wow, this guy's really pretty interesting." And the Scavenger's Guide, for those of you who don't know, is a really cool book about how he put together it was a Thanksgiving meal on all kinds of different foods that he had gathered in the wild, everything from little pigeon babies from out under a bridge to trapping sparrows or catching them with snares, and some eels, and then some fish from Alaska with Ron and Joan Layton, who I ended up spending some time with, and just lovely people. And it was just really fascinating listening to him talk about Escoffier, the French chef that the book was based on, a cookbook that Escoffier, a French chef from the late 1800s, early 1900s, and how Steve pitched this book idea, and damn, he said somebody bought it. And so he had to go out and do this thing. And it was just really interesting. And then he gets towards the end of the segment, and he goes, "Oh, and by the way, I got this other book came out. It's called American Buffalo in Search of a Lost Icon." And he talked about the book a little bit. I took a sticky note out of the glove compartment of the car my wife was driving, and I wrote Steven Ranella on it and stuck it to the dashboard of the Prius on the way to the Energy Fair. And we go and we do the whole, Energy Fair thing. And we stay up there Friday night. We stay up there Saturday night. And Saturday night, Otis and the Alligators are playing, which was kind of a blues band, dance band. And so we were dancing on uneven ground inside the tent. There's a point to this story, I promise you. And so we're dancing on uneven ground. And I wake up the next morning and my knee looks like a basketball, my left knee. And I was like, "Honey, I got a problem over here." And we may have had a couple of those Shine On beers that they make for that festival also. And anyway, so Sunday morning we're heading back, and we had to stop and get bags of ice for me to put my knee on, cover my knee. And we stop on the way back, and we get into Madison, and we go to the pharmacy, and we get crutches. And as we're getting out, Trish is like, "You just get in the house. I'll unload the car." I mean, it was only a couple of bags, but so both doors of the Prius are open. The front doors of the Prius are open, and I'm schlepping myself into the house on the crutches. Wind blows through, takes that sticky note, blows it across the yard. She sees it, and I don't think it was because she knew what was written on it. She's just doesn't like litter, and she trots over there and picks it up and looks at it and goes, "Oh, here's the name of that dude that we were listening to on the way up." Had she not done that, none of all this other stuff would have happened in the last 13 years. So it was a simple twist of fate. She went and because I was laid up, because my knee. And so she went down to the Borders bookstore, and sure enough, they had both books. And I read them both in just a few days and ended up sending him an email to the publisher. And lo and behold, he wrote me back. And we became pen pals, such as it was with email. And then after about, I don't know, 9 months or 10 months or something like that, we had sort of this lovely conversation that kind of went back and forth, and time would pass. But then all of a sudden, one of us would write to the other one. And I said, hey, man, if you ever, this has been great, but if you ever want to hunt in Wisconsin, let me know. And his email response was 2 words: really? ? When ? And in 2000, on New Year's Day of 2010, so New Year's Eve 2009 to 10, I went to Madison and picked him up at the airport, and we became friends that weekend. And all this other stuff has happened since.
That's wild.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it really was. And I was telling those kids earlier when I was talking to them, because the kid was like, I can't believe you answered my email. And I was like, well, as long as I can. And that a day is going to come where I'm not going to be able to respond to everybody, but I try to respond to anyone who reaches out to me in a nice way, not the ones that call me names and stuff because of some disparaging comment I made about Ted Nugent or something. But I try to respond in a thoughtful and respectful way as much as I can. And as I told Steve on the podcast on Monday when we were talking about it, I was like, I've responded to a lot of people because you responded to me. And I feel like that's just kind of paying back the universe,
Yeah. And I feel like that's also very Wisconsin type thought process too. So thank you. Thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Are you both from Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So
can you tell by our accents?
Wisconsin? Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't. Well, yeah. Yes, I could. I just recognize you as my people, I guess. But it's funny because I have, friends around the country and stuff, and they actually refer to, and I don't know if this is a thing or not, but they refer to the Midwestern passive aggressive-ness.
I've heard Midwest nice, but
yeah, I don't think I've heard the passive aggressive.
I can be passive aggressive, so I guess I won't refute that.
Yeah, I can't either. As my father used to call it, telling someone to go to hell in such a way that they'll look forward to the trip.
There you go. That sounds pretty accurate, actually.
That's a good motto.
My dad was he was the king of stuff like that. I don't know if he made it up or if he just remembered all kinds of stuff, but a lot of what I say comes from the wisdom of my father, I guess. So anyway, that's not what we came to talk about either. Or is it? I'm not sure.
Yes, a little bit of both. So, Doug, one of the things that I really was attracted to you for was kind of your motto that you became almost kind of famous for, is that it's not ours, it's just our turn. There you go. Yep.
It's available.
Yeah.
If you're
we'll talk about.
If you're not watching on YouTube,
yeah,
he's got some merch on.
Yeah. So there was a question there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and just as farmers, I mean, I'm 5th generation on our cranberry marsh.
Oh, you are? Cool.
Yep, raising the start of the 6th generation. So there's a reason why we've been around for this long, growing nothing but cranberries for as long as we have. So how did you kind of come up with that? And I mean, as farmers, it's pretty obvious, but is that kind of like the fuel to your fire and kind of what started it all? Or how did you kind of really push that, I guess?
Well, yeah, thanks. I'm happy to explain. I wonder if it is I think generational farmers, it's something that we learn, right? It's not ours, it's just our turn. Well, I've been heavily influenced by Elder Leopold, and he wrote many things much more eloquently than I will ever say, and was a much smarter and wiser man than I, and something that I realized a couple of weeks ago when I was on a podcast with Mark Kenyon from the MeatEater group, and we had Stan Temple on, and Stan Temple is professor emeritus from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who had the same position that Elder Leopold did. The wildlife ecology department was established when Leopold was there, and the particular position that Leopold had, Stan Temple also had. And it was just wonderful to listen to. I've known Stan for a while, but listen to him talk about Leopold and, sort of interpret Leopold. And you can read, there's so many quotes from Leopold. And one that I really like is, there's a number of them, but one that has to do with private land. And that is that conservation will ultimately come down to rewarding the private landowner for conserving the public's resources. And I find that to be really timely now because of, the time that he said that was when the Soil Conservation Service was just starting. And there's work that he was doing in that was done in Coon Valley, and a lot of stuff that I'm sure you both have been involved with through like the Natural Resource Conservation Service and FSA, and all those things have kind of changed. And and the other thing, I never get the quote exactly right, but it is essentially that once we realize that we're a member of a ecosystem rather than trying to dominate it, that we're a member of it, that we start to look at it more with love and caring. Well, as I said, Leopold had tremendous influence on me. I remember seeing a Sand County Almanac for the first time when I was in high school, and the librarian who, I was in the library, and for whatever reason, I'm sure it was in there to do some research on something, or read a sports magazine or something. And she said, I think you would like this book. I mean, she knew a little bit about me and enough about me to know, and it was sitting there on the desk. And then I did start to read it, and sort of, I was kind of inspired by it. Right. And having grown up, as I told you earlier, with a farm, not necessarily on it, my family, my great grandfather came from Germany in the 1850s. Her grandparents came from, part of the family was born in Germany, part of the family here. My grandparents had a sawmill, and actually had a railroad also that went from here to Laval, 7 miles long, or as he liked to say, it's not as long as all the others, but it's just as wide. The sawmill, and so they were lumbermen, right? I mean, and you could look at the plat books like in the late 1800s or early 1900s, you see Joseph Duren. And then the next time the plat map would come out, he'd be on a parcel of property, but then it'd be gone. And in coming up on 120 years ago, in 03 actually, but it's close enough that I say 120 years ago, they had the sawmill up here, pointing behind me, in a town called Germantown, and that's where the sawmill in the original homestead was. That's still in the family. It's just owned by a cousin of mine. And then our farm, or the land that became our farm, was about a mile away. So in 03, he bought a part of that farm, or part of that woods, for the timber. So a 400-acre farm. And when we were farming big, our cropland was 114 acres. And now it's 100 acres of tillable, although it's all in CRP, 60 acres of pasture, and 240 acres of woods. So he had the woods to supply raw material to the sawmill that was a mile away. And my grandfather, who was a World War I vet, also had a sawmill here in Cazenovia. And I actually have a picture of my great-grandfather standing by his railroad, or the locomotive. Everybody else I heard he was kind of a tough guy, mean old cuss, and everybody else kind of standing away from him. He looks very kind of Abe Lincoln-like. He's got a stovepipe hat on. And then there's some boards off to the side. My dad said, well, that was your grandfather's sawmill there. So that was in the, right after World War I. So in the late teens, early 20s. And our farm had been, or what became our farm had been, they'd carved a farm out of that. And the barn, which is a little over 100 years old now, is actually finished in 104 years old now. It was finished in 1918. Was wood that was sawn it there, and then brought, and the same guy built the barn, or the same builder, I should say, or building, I don't know if it was a company or whatever, but a group of dudes built the barn on the homestead farm, and then ours as well. It was a big 100-foot barn, all stone walls, big barn for those days. And it's all a mix of wood, all kinds of stuff in there, sort of classic Wisconsin dairy farm. Anyway, there's a chunk of our woods that we just did what's called shelterwood harvest on. And when I say just in the last 10 years, the shelterwood harvest takes a period of time to do that. And they were 100 to 115 to 125-year-old red and white oaks. Farm's been in my family for 120 years. Well, was it cut before that? Actually, it hadn't been. There had been some sort of big wind event that knocked all the trees down up on this ridge, and they never got to it, right? But what happened is that disturbance allowed oaks to grow up through it, which was what red and white oak really needs. So it was a very strong stand of almost purely red and white oak. And so my dad died a few years ago, 5 years ago now, I guess. And he was 92 when he died. So he kind of grew up with those trees. Mm-hmm. The rest of the farm, they went through and they cut this and cut that and did, all that kind of stuff. So it was, for the time, pretty well managed. That woods never really got touched much. We did a little bit of harvesting up there when I was, like, I don't know, late teens or something. They took a few white oak trees for whiskey barrels, and which is, of course, what white oak is really valuable for now is wine and whiskey barrels also. And then, it's just cool knowing a part of the history of the farm. Like there's where that field was, that was all sugar maple back in the day, and they cut it anyway. So I kind of grew up with that, and it sort of was just a part of my my thought process. I mean, I like to say I got the dirt of the place under my fingernails and some of it in my blood too, and I don't think we can. I mean, obviously it's a metaphor, but I really feel. I mean, I can't, and I'm sure you understand this connection to a piece of property that's been in your family for so long. Anyway, we were planning this shelterwood harvest in this woods that my dad grew up with. And before he died, he goes, "Well, Douglas, I can do my dad pretty good." He says, "Well, Douglas, I know it has to be done. I just didn't want to be the one to do it." And, comes a time, right? Mm-hmm. Oaks can live to be a really ripe old age, but at the same time, they hit an economic maturity. And so there's sort of a balance of all of that. I was working with a DNR forester up there, and I had a consulting forester come in and mark the trees. And I was just getting him to approve it because we were in the managed forest law. And we're walking out of the woods. And a shelterwood harvest, for those of you who don't know, is a very aggressive way and planned way of regenerating red and white oak, which we're losing from the landscape in the driftless area, because they need particular kinds of disturbances. And then we got these deer that love white oak acorns and browse on red oak seedlings. So you really have to have a lot of. Anyway, we're walking out of the woods, and Mike Finley was the DNR forester I was working with, and we paused at the top of the hill, and he goes, I have to tell you that I'm very impressed with your willingness and your family's willingness to take on something like this shelterwood harvest and think about the future, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, 100 years ago they were, and he goes, yeah, but still, and it seemed like while we were standing there on that hill, and I can remember the spot where we stopped and everything, that I felt like I was surrounded by my great grandparents and my grandparents, and to a degree my parents. And then I was thinking about what's next for that woods, because one of the things that Mike really made me think about was, when you do forestry work, when you do a harvest, it's not just about what you're taking, but it's very much about what you're leaving as well. And the driftless area had been high graded for quite a while. They take all the best and leave all the crap, right? And so we were actually doing the worst first, and then aggressively managing in a way that we actually have a pretty good regrowth of red and white oak. Anyway, it's like, it's just kind of cool that, it's not something everybody would do. And people, especially newer landowners, really want to kind of hold their land. Oh, this is the way I bought it. And, doing nothing is a management plan. It's not just necessarily a good one, right? And I, at that moment, had that feeling. And I said, well, I guess I look at it, it's not ours. It's just our turn. And he went, you ought to write that down. And so it did. And it really has become my mantra, and it's spoken to people not just in the state and the driftless area. I mean, I was talking very specifically about our property, of course, but it was also about, it's come to mean, I just love the driftless area in this region. And then it's resonated with people across the country and quite honestly, across the world. We've had people contact us from all over the world to buy the merch. And, it's really gratifying that it speaks to people in that way and in their own way. And I guess, it's that. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's so huge that you can reach so many people with just a simple little message like that and have it be so relatable. I know, like, my mom, our farm is through my mom's side of the family, and she has trees in her backyard. And if you even come near it with, just a little lobster claw trying to trim off a branch, it's like, oh my gosh, don't touch that. It's, how old that branch is. It's like, well, Mom, you need to trim it up a little bit. But so she's very protective over her trees. So I think I'm going to pass this episode along to her and be like, no, you really need to listen to this and understand how.
Sounds like your mom and I are kindred souls. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those people who, like ourselves who have been on land, how would you kind of approach them to getting started on doing something like this, or just taking care of their land in ways that they might not be used to or familiar with? Is there someone that they can reach out to kind of start like a conservationship plan or like a management plan?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of folks who, it's really interesting to, and I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here real quick, but I'll try to jump right back up out of it again. One of the things that's changed in our area a lot since when I was 12 years old, right? I'm 63 now, is that I remember when I was 12, the first person from away who bought land here. And it was interesting that someone was buying land here for the reason of doing conservation work on it. I didn't realize that at the time, but over time, it's still in his family. The guy's name was Hans Morsbach, and that land is still in his family. But it was like the first person. Now, 65% of our county is owned by people who don't live here. And, there's a part of me, it's like, oh. On the other hand, the property that cat bought was a mess. It was, the creeks were real wide and shallow. It was highly erodible, all of that. And he ended up planting trees on it and stuff. And he started with, and so what I would suggest is this, and that has changed over time, I guess that's one of the big changes that I've seen over time. And management planning really starts with the individual, like, why'd you buy it? So I have a land management consulting and contracting business, and I didn't come on here to pitch that or anything, but I do.
Pitch away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's DougDuren.com. And if you go on the land management page of my website, you'll see here are all kinds of resources for landowners. And then down at the bottom, it's like, if you go through all that and you still want to hire me, I'm like the biggest soft seller there is when it comes to all this stuff. There are a tremendous amount of resources for landowners out there. And one I'll tell you about is My Wisconsin Woods. And it was a project that I was actually involved with at the beginning through the Aldo Leopold Foundation. And I continue to do work with the Leopold Foundation and the American Forest Foundation. There's a great book that I don't have a copy of here, but you can get from the Aldo Leopold Foundation called My Wisconsin or My Healthy Woods. And it really is a primer, of getting started in management. When I talk to folks, when people contact me about doing land management work on their property, a lot of them are absentee owners. And usually it starts with, they bought this piece of land, 40 or 80 or whatever. And they were like, oh, we're going to go out there on the weekend and we're going to pick berries. And, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, and then they're cutting firewood and they're doing this and then that. And then they call me and I go out there. And I was doing this woodland advocacy program, for a volunteer program, landowner to landowner thing for a long time. And universally, people would say, I can't believe how much work it is to own a piece of land. Mm-hmm. So what I suggest people do is to first have that conversation with themselves. Why do we have this place? Absentee landowners or new landowners, especially, why did I buy this place? Or why did I, or in my case, although Trish, my wife, and I own 30 acres adjacent to the farm too that we bought. And sometimes we go, why did we buy this? And so you have that conversation with yourself and answer those big questions. Why did I buy it? And then what do I want to do with it? And then you also should explore your own conservation ethic and your own conservation idea. And that's where the Leopold Foundation is a great place to go. They're great. They have wonderful resources there. UW Extension is another great place. Your county conservation department is another great place. And the county, almost every county in the state has a county DNR forester. These folks are all there for free, and so I'm always saying, well, and you don't have to feel like, well, the government guy is going to come out and tell me what to do, or gal. My county forester now, Julie Van Cleve, that I work with, is probably one of my favorite people that I've worked with in the professionals that I've worked with, because she's very much kind of pulls that out of you, what it is that you're trying to do. And then, I mean, don't get me wrong, it comes down to telling you where the bear goes through the buckwheat. She'll do that too. Like, you need to be thinking about invasive species control, deer control, because of what they're doing to the ecosystem and all of that. She will, but those are good conversations to have. One of the cool things for me is, in the last 15 years, I've been involved with some of the stuff at DNR Forestry in particular, and they've had, I've worked with several foresters, and this one that I was telling you about has now become a regional supervisor, and he's had me be a part of training days for foresters, and like, how do you talk to landowners? And, you don't have a forest, you have woods, it's not, don't use acronyms and those sort of things, or if you do, explain what it is right away. Well, let's talk about the size of the tree. Oh, there's this thing called basal area, and there's, DBH, the diameter or breast height. These are how we measure trees, and, so that people aren't intimidated by that. But one of the things, if people are interested in getting involved with their own management, as opposed to just hiring somebody to do it, which, happens, and I'm happy to do that for some folks, that just self-education. There's just so much material out there. You can literally go on DougDuren.com and look at all, and under the land management page, and there's all kinds of stuff, all kinds of free information on there. And it leads you to more. And My Wisconsin Woods through the Aldo Leopold Foundation is one of the best places. And it's not just for landowners either. This other thing that I do want to talk about in a little bit, about getting people involved with conservation. It's an opportunity for them to learn, like, what's TSI, timber stand improvement. And why is that important? Or invasive species control. Why is that important? And how do we do that? Wildlife management. One of the things I talk about with hunters and access seekers and foragers and stuff is, habitat. It is so important to understand what that is, and what the various animals, or whatever it is that you want to pursue, what those require. If you want to be a better hunter, or a better forager, or a better fisher person, or any of those things, you need to know the environment in which your prey lives in. And I know a few pretty good deer hunters who didn't know what the hell tree they had their bow stand hanging in, but the best ones know everything that's going on. So did I answer your question?
Yes. Yes, you did. And then some. So I think you kind of started getting into this new project that you kind of started working on, with Share the Land, where you're kind of merging private landowners with hunters who might want to seek access on that, and kind of connecting them together. Do you want to explain that a little bit? And if you're a landowner, how you can reach out to hunters and vice versa?
Sure. So Sharing the Land is an initiative that some friends of mine and I started. And I happen to be the landowner, right? One of them is a woman named Erin Holmes, and Erin was a farm bill biologist, ecologist with Pheasants Forever and NRCS in our area. And Erin's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and she's also one of the most passionate people. She's now working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Missouri, but we stay in touch, and she's working with me on this project. I need to invite you to our kickoff, and your husbands to our kickoff day as well. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. But the idea of, we believe in cooperative access. There's a few basic premises, and you're probably aware of this, that access to private land has value. Most of the land, especially in Southwest Wisconsin, but really in the eastern United States, most of the hunting and foraging and recreation land is privately owned. I mean, it just is. Mm-hmm. Not right or wrong, it's just the way it is, and if you're going to, and again, over time, we've seen this evolution. When I was a young man, it was actually, I say when I was a kid a lot. And actually, I know some people that if they listen to podcasts that I'm on, they've turned it into a drinking game now. Every time that when I say when I was a kid, they take a drink and they're schnockered by the end of it. Anyway, so drink. When I was a kid, access was easy. You knew everybody. It was, and there was all these little dairy farms and all these farms, and you had that opportunity. We all hunted together, ran through the woods together, and did all that kind of stuff together. As I said, over time, now 65% of our land is owned by people who don't live here. First thing that people from away do is put up no trespassing signs. It's like the first thing they do. And when they call me and I go out and meet with them, I was like, I want to take those no trespassing signs down because, it kind of makes you look like a jerk. And they're like, yeah, but we don't want people. I understand. But in Wisconsin, as you two, I'm sure know, our trespass laws, if you don't have permission to be on somebody's property, you are trespassing. Used to be, when I was a kid, when I was a kid, that you had to have your land posted. But what people would do is then just go and tear the things down and say, well, it wasn't legally posted. Yeah. Okay. It wasn't legally posted, so I'm not really trespassing. I'm like, oh boy. And I grew up with that, right? And that guy, that first person that I said from away, it's actually kind of a funny story. He bought this land and he drove a brand new Mercedes-Benz. He was from Milwaukee. And to a kid from Casanova, Mercedes-Benz, especially a brand new one, looked like a spaceship, right? And so there was this place where we all accessed the trout stream. And it was by Charlie Green's place. And you just go through the fence there and go down to the trout stream. And couple of buddies and I rode up there one day, and here on the fence, on the gate, was a sign that said, if your land is posted, stay the hell off of mine. I mean, what a great, like, holy moly. And we all kind of looked at each other, we were 12 years old on our bicycles. And I don't know. So we just went, Well, what it was that dude bought that land and he posted it right away. And it was like, I remember that land being, because we actually hunted right next to it. It was like, what do you mean posted? We can't go in there, I guess. No trespassing. What the hell are you talking about? We just went wherever we wanted to. So in a 50-year period of time, that all changed. Well, access in those days wasn't that big of a deal. You just went hunting. And then you went running through the woods or picking mushrooms or doing whatever. But then access has become more and more valuable because of guys like Stephen Ranella. Mm-hmm. All that. There's some, it's in Field and Stream. And I remember having a little book when I was a kid about deer hunting, and that was it. And then there was Stan Brand's Outdoor Calling on Channel 3, which is the only station we got. And but you think about the whole outdoor media thing and this sort of blessing and a curse, right? There's just all of these things, the pros and cons of it all. Excuse me. So one of the pros of it is that a guy like Hans bought that land and he improved it. The con of it is that it got shut down. And over time, as there was more and more of that, it became problematic. I can tell you right now, on our 400 acres here, so I probably don't have to tell you what land is worth around here anymore. Mm-hmm. But our 400 acres out here, it used to be that the cropland was worth, whatever amount of money, and the rough land was worth about half that. Well, now they're worth about the same. And that price just keeps going up and up. And skyrocketing, accelerating in such a way that there is nothing that we could do on our farm right now. Like if I was going to say to my brothers and sisters, we all own it together in an LLC, I'm going to buy you all out. And they can go, yeah, well, what are you going to do to, I don't know what I would, there's nothing I could do there to make it where it used to be sort of driven by the return on investment. But ours is such a recreation property that there's high value for the recreation access of it. And so properties are being bought because people want their piece of the driftless area. And another side note, there's a thing called Circle of Cities. It's worth looking up. It was written by, or is a concept put forward by a landscape architecture regional planning professor at the University of Wisconsin named Dr. Phil Lewis in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. And everything that he said is coming to fruition. And the driftless area is right in the middle of this circle of cities. And if you think about all the big urban areas around us, then that's people are coming here for that, right? And it's great. I mean, in some ways, it's really great. The small farms are gone. Mm-hmm. And they're gone not because these people from away were coming and buying the land. They're gone because big agriculture. I remember in the early 70s when Earl Butz was the Secretary of Agriculture in the Nixon administration, he said, get big or get out. And we've seen that happen, right? It's interesting to me now that we see sort of small agriculture coming back. I have some friends who are doing like small specialty stuff. And then of course, CSAs and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I just think those are the pendulum swings of the long arc of time. Anyway, a lot of places that were, well, it's a damn shame these people are coming and buying it. I'm like, well, yeah, I just kind of go, well, I mean, it doesn't hurt that I'm in the land management business. And although I'm 63, I'm close to retiring, but it's, it's the pros and cons. It just is what it is. And we can affect that. One of the things I can tell you about people who are from away, who buy land here, is that they have the wherewithal to put into the property too. Generally, there are people you can influence, that a guy like me could influence. And so one of the ways I'm trying to influence them, coming back to the subject, is that is to get them to think about allowing access to their property for people who are willing to help them take care of it. That's the long and short of it, right? It's just like when I was back in the day when when I would be able to hunt on the neighbor's property. It's like, well, yeah, when they need a little help baling hay, guess what we were doing? Helping them bale hay, and we didn't get paid for it, because they'd come and help us too. But when it came to going hunting on there, we did it as a group. So it's the same idea. It's the cooperative nature of managing a piece of property. And so cooperative access, you've got land, you've got access seekers, you've got landowner. And if you look on our website, sharingtheland.com, on the front page, there's a Venn diagram where all those things come together. In the center is the land. I know, and so sharing the land is we're building a place where people can come together and do that. One of the things that landowners will say, well, I'd let people hunt here, but how do I trust them? And access seekers are like, well, I just want to go out there and just want to go hunting. Well, then go to public land. If you, and then there's the old school teacher in me and the follower of Aldo Leopold, who was involved, who started a cooperative back in the day called the Riley Game Cooperative. And the story is on the website also, the Riley Game Cooperative. So I'm just ripping off Leopold on this whole sharing the land thing. And with full knowledge, the Leopold people all know this, right? Bringing him forward into the 21st century. The idea that he and some friends worked on some farms in Riley, met these people, wanted to hunt, and they're like, yeah, well, we don't have that. We've got problems with trespassers, and we just don't seem to have that much game and all that stuff. And Leopold took a look around and he goes, well, your habitat kind of sucks too. I'm sure he put it more eloquently than that. But so they ended up putting together a program where they worked cooperatively to improve the habitat. And they formed ended up being kind of a community of people working, and the landowners provided the land. They may have provided some of the feed and some things. And then they were specifically after pheasants there. And then the city folk, Leopold and his buddies, they did the work. And boy, it was just fascinating. It's something that Leopold did that you don't read that much about. because at the same time, he bought the land over in Baraboo and wrote a Sand County Almanac. And so it's with that spirit that we've brought forward this idea of sharing the land, sharingtheland.com. And that whole idea of access has value, that if you're willing to put, I hear this from landowners all the time. I want to trust people. Well, how do you trust people? You have a relationship with them. So how can we develop that relationship? The landowner should have a management plan. Coming back down to that. Why do you have a management plan? So you know what needs to be done. I have a friend who allowed people to access his property just based on the work that they did on a trout stream that it's not on his land. It was down on some public land, but he saw him there doing it. He got a chat with him and they said, we were out public land turkey hunting and, thought we'd spend a little time cleaning up the trout stream. My buddy's a big avid trout fisherman. And he goes, well, how's the turkey hunting going? They're like, well, it kind of sucks. He goes, well, I got 240 acres up the road here. Nobody's hunting it this season. If you guys would like to go up there and hunt, you're welcome to. So he rewarded them for their contribution to conservation. The first person, we've had plenty of people hunt our property. The first person that I invited purely because of a contribution to conservation, besides Steve Riddell, was this friend of mine, Brock Rosenkrantz. And Brock is a young man. I don't know, he's 29, 30 years old now. And I met him. He had volunteered to be on our county conservation congress, a delegate to the Wisconsin County Conservation Congress. And I'm just at the meeting and I'm yakking with him beforehand. And that's happened on at this time of the year. And Brock said, we're just talking. I said, how's your turkey season looking? And he said, well, pretty good, but gee, I lost the private land. He wasn't sideline up to me. He kind of knew that I had this. He knew me from MeatEater, but because that wasn't that many years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. But I'm just like this dude from Richland County, just like him. We're just talking about stuff. And he goes, I used to have a really good, nice piece of private land to hunt, but that just got sold. But I'm looking for some other, but I got some other ideas. And I was like, well, hey man, if you what season do you have? And he told me, I was like, I don't have anybody hunting then. So if you you don't get the opportunity somewhere else, let me know. You can hunt on my place. And I think at that minute he quit looking for another place to hunt, but he was volunteering his time, making a contribution to conservation. And in return, I could see he was a good dude. Right. And so in return, I gave him that opportunity. He's been a part of it ever since. and it turns out he's a carpenter. And so he's helped me with, some projects around the property. And then there's, a couple other local, one of the other people is a guy who built the kiosks that we have for our chronic wasting disease drop-off site. Another fella is he's a IT guy, and guess who does my websites? And and he also does things on the farm. Erin, who I was telling you about earlier, even though she's in Missouri, she comes up and she's like not only my spiritual advisor about conservation, but also very specific about things that I can do. And helps me with some of those things as much as she can. Lindsay, who actually lives in the state of Washington, and she's a small, I don't know, you call her a backyard farmer. She's got 10 acres and she raises some sheep and she does she's fascinating, and actually very accomplished conservationist. She and I got connected some years ago when I was out in Seattle for a thing with MeatEater and met her and her husband and have kept in touch. And so she actually works for me, she's the one who sends out the merch and stuff. But she's also does a bunch of volunteer stuff. So she'll be here for the kickoff party. And then last year, Steve asked me, how many people hunted your farm, accessed your farm last year? And I was like, I think it's 40.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of them, their contribution to conservation was coming and killing a damn doe on our farm. Because we have, and that was one of the things that motivated me to do this. 8 years ago, I shot 7 deer. I'm sorry. 8 years ago, I shot 7 does one afternoon. And, you got all in the gut, and,
yeah.
And I was just stacking them up like cordwood, and then I'm gutting them out, and I kept 2 for myself. And the other ones I took down to the venison donation program. But even in that moment, why am I doing this? A couple of things. One, I love white-tailed deer. I'm fascinated by them, all of that, which is why I'm concerned about chronic wasting disease too. But I felt like a deer exterminator at that point. I'm like, I don't want to feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, at least you could donate it, but at the same time, if someone else could come and help you out and then also feed their family.
Understand why we were doing it. That was their contribution to conservation as far as I was concerned. Dana Fulton, who's on Channel 3, she's the one of the weather people there, and her husband Jared are a part of my co-op now. And she and I met because she wanted to do a thing about it's not ours, it's just our turn, and we did on Channel 3 and talked about conservation and stuff. And she's a real novice hunter. And she's like, well, we really want to come and help you with something. And I just invited them out because of because she had me on, and I'd met her husband, and he's a fisheries guy, and, interesting people. And they came out and hunted and stuff. And they're just like chafing at the bit to come out and do something. I was like, understand, you came out and took a doe. That is a contribution to conservation as far as I'm concerned. And you're right. They got the experience. They got the meat. They got the understanding of, I spent some time explaining to them why we're doing this. They learned about CWD. There's a lot of things that happen, as a result. It's not hard for me to find people to hunt on my place. I can tell you that. I got a list. I say that's like getting Green Bay Packer season tickets. It's a long ass list. And every year, a couple of people move up, come off of it. But it's kind of random as to who does and who doesn't, because ultimately I'm still people that I invite are interested or interesting. Steve, for instance, on his podcast last spring, invited Ya Yang, this Hmong guy from Minneapolis, and his daughter to come and turkey hunt before he even talked to me about it. And all of a sudden I'm getting text messages from him, hey man, did you ever listen to the podcast yet? And I'm like, no. And he goes, well, I kind of invited a guy to come hunting next spring. Is that okay? And I'm like, well, I'm flattered that you would be comfortable enough to invite someone else to my farm. I think flattered is the word I use now. It's not exactly the word I used then. I think I said, what the hell? Anyway, and then Ya and his daughter came, and I'm just fascinated by the Hmong people and their history and how, the whole Vietnam era war and all this stuff that went on. And so that's been a really interesting thing. And so, Ya moved up the list because of who he was. Joe Rogan and Brian Callen hunted on my farm. Well, Steve called me and said, hey, man, we just did this hunt with these guys. Would you be willing to do another one? And that was before we were doing Sharing the Land anyway. But the things that's never shown on this show is that because, you can only focus on so many people. There's 7 or 8 other people hunting at the same time. And, my neighbors and my buddies, or I think on the first episode, there were like a whole bunch of folks came. But, and a landowner, and through Sharing the Land, can kind of, it's sort of, we're trying to break down that barrier a little bit between the access seeker and the landowner through a way that makes a lot of sense, right? That there's value in this. You guys are probably aware that leasing has become a big thing in the state, that you lease land for hunting. And, quite honestly, I leased my farm for 12 days to 4 guys for bow hunting. And those guys, they've been doing it for 6 years, and they're always like, well, let me get this straight. We pay $1 to come here. And then the day after we're gone, you got people coming in here who don't pay anything. Yeah, you got it. But they get first choice because they're bow hunters, and they're, predominantly looking to kill big giant bucks, and that's okay. And they pay a fair amount of money, and that pays that keeps my siblings, my partners, is like that money goes into the pot that helps pay for the parts of because it costs money to run a farm, to own a farm too, or own land. We're in CRP. We sell a few cattle. We get this money from them. That's kind of it. And the value of that, it's not much return on something that's worth, I'm not embarrassed to say $2.5 million. The return on that should be a hell of a lot more than it is. But so it's sort of this balance. And then my siblings are like, cool, now you do whatever you want. And so I do. And they're fully behind this whole, it's not ours, it's just our turn, and the Sharing the Land idea. and all of that. And they don't have to be. I mean, I know other situations, I should say, where the family got torn apart over land and value. And it was like, there's 5 of us, we could all do with $500,000 if we just sold the place,
Mm-hmm.
But then we wouldn't have this. So there you have it. That's sharing the land.
That's pretty darn cool. I know, like with my dad, he's very protective over what he has. So this, I think, again, like I mentioned with my mom, I'm going to have to pass this along to him so he can kind of get a better understanding of the good that it could do. But I think, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I know you've got a bunch of other fun stories to share. So we might have to have you back on closer to hunting season and talk some hunting stories. But as just as a landowner, what is kind of your biggest takeaway or biggest suggestion for someone to take better care of their land? Like, what's kind of like your big, like a good first step to take?
Well, developing an adaptive management plan, and adaptive is an important word to that, because one of the things that I live by is seemed like a good idea at the time, right? And that happens in life more often than it should. It seemed like, multiflora rose is a great example. It was an introduced species, right? Now it's an invasive species. When they introduced it, I'm sure it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now we spend all this time trying to control it. So, or as Bob Dylan used to say, it used to go like that. Now it goes like this. Things change over time. But to have a plan and be thoughtful about it and be flexible, work with professionals, but also be in control, because ultimately it is yours, And I think that if someone, either a private professional or a public professional, is telling you this is what you should do, I'd be a little skeptical of that, as opposed to someone who say, here are the possibilities. You need to decide what's going to fit best for you. There are some universal truths in all of that too, but they should point that out for you. But to start with a plan and really be be open to the possibilities.
Perfect. I think that kind of sums it up pretty darn well. Before we let you go, Doug, we always like to ask our guests just some random questions, Wisconsin questions. Before I let you go. So what's your favorite? Do you prefer squeaky or fried cheese curds?
Oh, squeaky, fresh squeaky. Car Valley Cheese Factory is right over the hill from me over here. It's
you
get
can't
in the
beat
truck.
those.
We're going to the Car Valley Cheese Factory. Yeah, that's the stuff right there.
I don't know if, are you a big chocolate milk drinker?
I used to be.
Okay. Becca and I,
this one's important.
We have this big debate. We're big fans of Quick Trip chocolate milk, and I don't know if you dabbled in it, but they have a brown cap chocolate milk and they have a green cap chocolate milk. Are you experienced with this? Do you have a preference?
but you know what I'm going to do right after we get done here? I'm going to Quick Trip and taking a look.
So when you go, make sure you get the brown cap and the green cap and try them both out. You're going to have to let us know which you
It's sort of
prefer.
like the Pepsi challenge, huh?
Kind of.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that one of you is brown cap and the other is green cap.
Yeah.
Don't tell me who's who.
No.
Okay.
So don't even look at the label. Just go in with an unbiased opinion, and you're going to have to let us know
which one tastes better.
That's great. That's great.
So let's kind of wrap this up here, Doug. Where can people find you? I know you've mentioned it before, but if they want some of your merch, if they want to check out some of your resources, what's the best place to get a hold of you? All that other good stuff. Where can the people find you?
I appreciate that. My Instagram handle, and it's where I kind of do all my social media stuff, is at Doug Duren. Creatively enough, that's right. DOUGDUREN. And I tend to post a lot of stuff about conservation on there, or just whatever the hell is on my mind. And people seem to dig it. And so that's, I'm on Facebook too, but it's just an extension of my, I have a personal page, but that's different. But that's just an extension of, it's not ours, it's just our turn also. So that's Instagram. And then my website is dougduren.com. Again, easy to remember, right? And then the sharing the land is sharingtheland.com. And I'd appreciate it if anybody would like to go there. On the Sharing the Land website, there'll be more and more stuff coming forward. This is really, 2022 is really our year of expansion and proof of concept. And I'd love to have conversations with you guys more about that. We've got a few different people that were landowners, but then also some other groups and stuff. And it might be something worth featuring, over time. And I'm like a big fan of the small guy, being a small guy. I'm a large person, but a small whatever. And I like to see things grow organically. So when I saw your request and I kind of checked you out, and I was like, as I said, I'd like to learn more about the cranberry business, and I know a little bit about the dairy business, but like what Becca's take on that is just so interesting when she started telling me her story. So I hope that we can stay in touch and kind of we're moving in, in some of the same circles, or our circles are intersecting. And so, this is really great. I really enjoyed being here.
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot. Like I said, I think a lot of people are going to benefit from hearing your knowledge. You've got so much going on up there that I think this is going to have to be a multi-series thing with you if you're willing.
Well, I'd certainly do it again. And the other thing, of course, where you can find me is if you go to MeatEater with Stephen Ranella. I'm sure Steve would appreciate me mentioning that. I think that when it comes to hunting and recreation, outdoor recreation of that sort, and where it intersects with conservation, that MeatEater is the best there is. Mm-hmm. I've had the good fortune of being on 7 episodes of his show, a couple episodes of a thing called Back 40, which was a land management thing that's on their YouTube channel. Today's Thursday, Tuesday, an episode just came out that we filmed on the farm last December with Ryan Callahan, who's the director of conservation with MeatEater. And that's about deer hunting in Southwest Wisconsin and chronic wasting disease. And I think Cal did a great job with it.
Yeah, that was great.
It was a pleasure to work with those guys on it. And there should be another one coming out pretty soon that part of it was recorded on the farm, but I'm not really in it. It was a turkey hunting episode. There might be a section at the end, speaking of milk, where I just deliver 2 glasses of milk to the table and then walk away. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm hoping that that's in there because it was sort of Alfred Hitchcock-esque. And so, lots of places you can find me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here, and certainly will let folks that follow me know about your podcast as well.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for all of this. Again, go out to Quick Trip, get that chocolate milk, and let us know what you think.
This is a
hot topic. Huh? That's a hot topic.
It is. We're actually talking to someone from Quick Trip later this afternoon, so that's always kind of like our joke with them. So this is going to be kind of like the tiebreaker of all tiebreakers. So this is important.
Pressure.
No pressure. No pressure. Just don't get it wrong.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this. If you're not following us yet, you can go follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Forward Farming Podcast. And then you can also follow our personal pages. Amber is at Cranberry Chats and I am at Becca Helby. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.